My mic was off. That's fun. Welcome to the stream. My name is Random Hamilton, and I will be with you today. We're working on this piece of art. We started earlier in the week, started on Monday. We started laying down initial pens this afternoon, or earlier today, and we're just going to continue on. We're primarily drawing with a ballpoint Bic, just to kind of keep the texture soft, and then working with microns and Sharpies to kind of tighten everything up. If you have questions, concerns, or just ideas, or just want to pop in the chat and say hi, please feel free to do so. I love to have the interaction, makes the day go real smooth, and helps kind of keep myself getting too attached to the artwork and going down rabbit holes. Keeps me kind of like enjoying the opportunity. So I'm new to streaming. This is week 2, and so far it's been a blast. And so just kind of going to keep pushing, and hopefully this piece comes together in a way that kind of is where we want to land. Yeah, thanks for being on, and I can't wait to see where we go with this piece of art. All right, so let's go ahead and start off with where we were at. So the central point of this piece, the real focal point, is this dot right in the center. And what we're doing here is we're trying to think about, essentially this is like me having this like epiphany and these ideas while we're on stream. As you can see, this is my stream mic. And the stream is such an overflowing inspiration, which it really has been. It's been amazing. I've never created art to this degree or this pace before. It's really been a pleasure. So, we're just going to keep pushing. We're moving some pen around. We're kind of making some calls as we go in the moment, and then eventually this piece will become a sculpt for 3D, and hopefully maybe eventually a vinyl sculpt, vinyl 3D print that we can share out to anybody that'd like it. So that's kind of one of the goals we have right here. Alright, I'm just going to keep pushing here. Again, any questions, ideas, suggestions, concerns, please don't hesitate to throw them into the chat. It's very much appreciated. Your participation is wholly loved, especially for these kind of pieces. They can be a little bit daunting and take a little bit of time, and sometimes you just need a bit of a distraction to make it all the easier to get across the finish line, to make it through a piece like this. Let it not be misunderstood. No matter how solid you are as an artist, there are always these walls that you're going to run into as an artist where you're just like, I should work on something else, or it really is a point of intended mastery as an artist to push through that and complete the piece, because the moment the piece is done, you can move on to the next one. If you leave several pieces behind yourself, you're just going to have a growing list of things you just didn't quite finish. And it's always a little unfortunate, because it's very hard, especially when inspiration strikes, it's very hard to say, well, let's pause on that. Let's go back to the thing I didn't want to finish last time. Then you feel like it's a chore, and you don't necessarily always get to the point where you want to with your piece. So it really is beholden on you to just hang in there, push through, and try to make this version work as best you can. And just get it done, really. So we're just continuing on with where we were at earlier. We started laying in the smoke, laying in the points of contrast, really trying to make sure that we pop out some of these exploding head pieces is almost like cartoony. We're not doing gore, we're not doing blood. We're not doing realism. I know that I'm very clearly leaning into realistic textures and really trying to push like these details, but just because we're going into a realistic space in the textures doesn't necessarily mean that we're trying to align to all the formal requirements of a realistic piece of art. So don't get into that trap. That's something that can kind of happen, and it kind of feel when you get to a certain point, you feel obligated to align to realistic scale and texture and stuff. That works to a point, but just don't feel caged. You can operate anywhere in that space. That's really the beauty of what we do as artists. Try to push on the boundaries and what you're supposed to do, and then come up with something that is wholly unique and wholly special, which is what we're shooting for right here. So a couple things before I move up the page. I do think I need to shore up this portion, because I feel like if you look at this as a circle, this area has kind of lags behind into coming up, and just the corona kind of encroaching a little bit. And I think that may be something that would really help anchor over here. Not that it's missing anchors, but it could certainly use just a little bit more. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. Pull that up, pull it up, pull it up. So you'll notice, in the method I'm using, and I think I've talked about it before, so if you're a returning guest, obviously you've already heard this, but we're using a ballpoint pen so that we can go ahead and just paint with the ink. What I mean by that is we're not really pushing the pen down hard to create grooves. We're simply going ahead and layering the ink on top of the paper and then drawing it along and pulling it along the paper until it dries. That allows us to get a very soft, gradual finish. And then what we'll do is we'll slowly build up ink layers over the course of the project to slowly but surely add the darkening that we're looking for. In this case, it's very easy to get very nervous when it comes to the pen. The more you add, the less you can take away. But as you get comfortable with these tools, you'll start to realize that you have so much, there's so much time and so much room to push on these elements before you have to worry about the space where all of a sudden you've overdone it. And as long as you give yourself the room to play there and not overwork it, there is really lots of opportunity and certain techniques you can do should you go too dark to brighten an area up or give yourself more room to play. So we're just going to go ahead and keep pushing. One thing I don't like to do, I like to make sure that if I'm going to do things like this where I have like almost this nexus of light kind of blasting out, I really like to make sure that I don't go too formal. Light is this thing that expands and contracts constantly, right? Light, based off its source, will be either consistent or non-consistent. And even then, it's not consistent because depending on what light's hitting, you're going to have movement. So in this case, we have light blasting out in the center of a head, and then we have a bunch of exploding parts of the face, but also we have the beard, we have the hair. There's so many other elements that are taking light in. And all of these lights, as you know, especially hair and exploding parts of the face, obviously, will be moving. And so it's really incumbent on you to think about how to make sure that you communicate that there's a lot of transition happening. And light can do some funny things in transition, which is actually one of the things we're relying on to not try to attach to the realism aspect of this. Because we're like, you know what? If we are fully incapable of creating this thing realistically, then we just need to simulate enough realism so that the viewer sees it and thinks, oh wow, that's exactly how that would go, right? I don't need the viewer to look at it and see like, well, the light's kind of doing the right thing, or it's kind of doing this. Like, we should have enough control on our hand and what we're doing to be able to really clearly define our boundaries, our visual boundaries for the viewer. One thing to really keep in mind, and I again, if you're a returning guest on the phone right now, you've heard me say this, but I really don't care to do gory. It doesn't appeal to me, and it's not really what I'm looking for. What I'm more interested in is developing this piece so that it sells the idea, but it's much less on the gory end and more on the abstract, surprising end. You notice I just kind of jumped up here. I just noticed that the nose could use a little bit more of an intent contour, and then I could go ahead and bring the shading down from the nostril. So this will happen a lot if you're watching me. I'll be kind of working on an area, and then I'll kind of notice something in the corner of my eye that should be adjusted, and then before you know it, I'm at a different part of the piece kind of plugging along. And this is just kind of the way I operate. As much as I think I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to go ahead and conquer this piece, I'm going to conquer this piece, you know, I'm fairly driven by inspiration of the moment, so to speak. And if I notice something that could be improved upon, I'll usually jump into that to make that happen. Just knowing that at any point I can, really come back and address another area that I haven't quite finished up. And that's just kind of my preference to work. I don't like to be too formal. I like to keep it enjoyable and light and allow the piece to kind of take me around on areas that it needs to develop better. So now we've got that guy there. There's something about... Yeah, that's why. This is wrong, actually. I made a mistake. This will happen. This will happen on everybody's piece. Everybody is fallible. Everyone makes mistakes. So I'm kind of treating these pieces of the face almost like porcelain that broke apart. So that there's like this kind of thickness to it, almost like the face exploded and really what happened was like the inside of a piggy bank exploded. And so I need to make sure that I am consistent with the way that the underside and the side walls of this stuff looks. And that was a spot where I was definitely not consistent. It's no harm, no foul. All stuff we can fix. It's not really that big of a deal. But it's good to catch it. It's good to kind of recognize when you've made those errors and then do something about it in the moment. Versus like saying, well, I'll deal with that later, and then coming back to it and then forgetting, oh, that was the thing that was wrong. I can't tell you how many times that I've been like, oh, I'll fix that later, and then I don't fix it, and then I come back and I refine the thing that's wrong, and then I've got a bigger problem because now I've really committed into that design flaw without thinking about it. It's a real problem. Okay, got the boozy-boos there. I'm going to go ahead and just, that's the wrong size pen. Go ahead and make sure it has the kind of graphic nature of liquid that I like to put into my pieces. When I put pieces or blobs of liquid into my piece, I like to give it a very dark base and then lift that into more like a white highlight, kind of a pop. And that just makes sure that it's going to pop out against this very soft shading that's happening behind it. And I'm going to go ahead and give these guys a nice hard line to really make them pop out as well. So that'll be a thing. Alright, let's go ahead and give these guys a nice little outline just to make sure that they stand out against the background. I also need to stop making sure I don't use a 005. let's just use a 0.5. I prefer to have a little bit of a thicker nib. It gives me just that little more control. I'm not going for tiny lines, I'm going for strong lines. That's a pretty important aspect of inking, by the way. Smaller is not always better. In fact, I would say some of my best lines come from a thick-ass Sharpie. You know, it's not about a scale aspect, or maybe for you it is, but for me, let me allow for that then. For me, it's much more about making sure that I'm able to use the correct line weight to emphasize. That emphasis, to me, for my art, anyways, is everything. Emphasis and contrast are big goals. Alright, 1 second, I'm just looking at just a piece of some of the reference I pulled together just to make sure that I'm staying consistent with my visual approach here. That'll happen quite often. You know, return back to the ideas, the reference you've pulled. It goes a long way to making sure that you're just staying consistent through the whole piece. It's not always easy to do that, so sometimes you just need to kind of take a second, go back and double check your work, go back and double check what you're working off of, and see if that helps kind of bring it along the finish line for you a little bit better. All right, back to it. Let's get this bottle done. Actually, I think that will be really helpful if this bottle is done, and then let's do the other eye right there. One thing you'll notice here is I deviated from the sketch line I had for the bottle label. It's really common. The trick for making things look mechanically consistent is really to go ahead and if you have a line you've already laid down, so in this case for me with the back of the bottle, I just make sure that the label line follows that and ignore your sketch line. You know, the sketch line is simply there to kind of lay down your idea. It really is in your best interest to be able to make an adjustment like that on the fly to better account for like changes in shape and areas, especially if you do a bad line, like a hard line next to something else that shouldn't, that doesn't line up. The eye will go right there. You know, you're essentially making such an interruption that your eye can't help but look at it, and that's how you have to think about these things. You have to think about your artwork kind of like what areas of the piece do I want to stop somebody's eye? And if you start adding a bunch of areas away from the center of your focus because of little mistakes that you just were rushing or didn't take time to think about, it really can cause a lot of distraction for your viewer to actually follow the story in the way you're trying to portray it. And so just keep that in mind. You know, we are storytellers. We are artists that are just putting stories on paper, and we're helping tell stories. And just take it in that context, and it will go a long way to kind of helping you reach the end of a piece in a way that feels really good. Okay, now this is one thing that you'll see me often do. I'm not confident when it comes to font. So I like to go in with pencil and be very specific about what I'm going to put down, and then just try to copy that exactly. Now, keeping in mind, there's just no right or wrong way to develop these kind of artwork. You know, you're just kind of pushing lines and getting it to speak in the way that you would like to have it speak. That's one thing I think I would try. I would really like to convey, if we have anybody, you know, I'd love to eventually get to the point where we have people coming on to kind of talk about their artwork, share some ideas. Maybe we can do some art critiques, or you know, just a review, and try to just give some constructive direction, and find ways to kind of help people improve without having them feel like they are putting themselves on blast. One of my favorite things to do in this kind of environment is to share ideas. I can always use more information. I can always use feedback to kind of help me improve. And I think that is true to a lot of people. It's just I think a lot of people are kind of put off by the idea of getting feedback or putting themselves out there in front of people. I can assure you, as a guy sitting here in front of the camera, it's not so hard. You just got to do it. Once you do it, it's amazing the kind of growth you can have. It really is quite impressive how quickly you can develop as an artist if you give yourself the opportunity to improve. And part of that improvement is opening yourself up to a group of people that can look at your art and they have all their varied experiences. And it really just goes a long way towards helping you make advancement. And everybody kind of receives that advancement in their own special way. Everybody has their challenges. Every single artist has that struggle where they're trying to figure out what it is that defines or shows the artwork the right way, or a way that they feel proud of, you know? So we're just going to continue pushing here. Now, there's a couple things that are going on with this bottle. Part of me thinks that I should take it more detailed like glass, but if I really lean into the reference that I had pulled initially for this, from my own personal kind of guide, I was looking at some work by Macbeth, and you know, in his case, he goes full wide. And I don't know if I want to go that route, but I'm not hating that idea. You know what? Let's just be ballsy. Let's do it. What's the worst that can happen, right? You know, this is one of those things where I would say it's okay to gamble even with pen. There's just you can't possibly do enough damage to your piece that you can't find a positive way to come back in and bring it to where you'd like it to be. You just kind of got to let yourself have the freedom to make some kind of out there choices and see what comes of it. in this case, I don't feel like this is going to be too problematic. I don't think it's going to be like the center of the page or anything like that. And what this allows me to do is this allows me to take this glass and make it almost like a blackened glass, but blackened glass still has a obscene amount of shine on it. So all I'm doing is I'm making sure that that shine really pops. For context, if you can't draw the mental comparison to the way the light's going to reflect on this, think about the way blood sits in a blood pack. How, because the blood pack bulges out and the bulk of it is in the center, along the sides, it's always like a little bit of a more translucency. So if you hold I don't even know this because sitting in the hospital with my wife when she was going to the hospital, if you see a blood pack through light, the edges are lighter. They're a little glossier. It's just a thing, visual reference if it helps to kind of give you an indication of where we're going with this. Alright, now what you saw me doing here was mostly just kind of layering in the bulk of the black. I know it's super dark in this bottle, that's okay. We're not going for perfection, we're just not. There's so many other things going on in this piece that little things like this aren't worth spending a ton of time on, but it is important that you make it feel intentional. So just keep that in mind. Areas like this where I've laid in a huge amount of black, also you'll notice here, look at my finger. You notice that black mark right there? You've got to be cautious. Think of the pen you're working with. Think of the amount of time it takes for a big chunk of black to draw. If you're not careful, you can go and get some on your finger, and before you know it, you just track that across the page, and then it's something you have to deal with. That's not always bad, but who wants to deal with it if they don't have to? So now we're just going to go ahead and tighten all of this up. I want to make this as smooth and almost like almost like it's painted on, because that's the way glass and reflections work. There's no consistency because as light passes around it, light catches and then reflects where it can. So I'm just going to go ahead and just allow that to be the case. Keep this all nice and smooth. Smooth that out. And then we're going to hard line the hell out of this as soon as we get done with this reflection. And you'll see what I'm talking about, where this thing will just kind of pop. Something else I like to do if I'm working on glass, instead of doing a hard line to define an edge or a contour, do a dotted line. Your eye, when you zoom out, your eye will naturally diffuse that line. It's one of the ways you can get away with making highly reflective surfaces. And keeping a few detail lines present is that very technique. I'm going to throw this out there. Perfect. Oh, okay, now if this doesn't drop like a nice little beat, I'm going to be very disappointed. 1, 2, 3. There it is. Okay. It felt like it needed to happen, One of the things I don't think a lot of people talk about is the importance of what you're listening to when you're creating. I wouldn't say any genre is better than the other, obviously, but I do think that there's something to be said about listening to music that fulfills a certain pacing or speed, or just kind of hits you in the right way. For me, I really do jive with hip hop when it comes to drawing, and if I really need to buckle down and work, I've got a deadline and I've got to bust some stuff out. Yeah, I'll throw on some headphones, I'll throw on some Action Bronson, I'll throw on some Del Homo Sapien, or Wu-Tang. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Kendrick, Lil Nas X, depending, and just kind of roll, The power of letting music kind of set the metronome for your body, and then just moving with that is so cool. And sometimes art can kind of take on a life of its own when you've got really good music going. And if you just let the moment ride and just keep drawing, often what will happen is you will kind of finish a song and come out of it and realize that you've done a ton of work that you hadn't really thought about, but certainly you found a nice rhythm and just kind of kept producing. It's a very cool experience to have as an artist. It's almost like drawing on autopilot. If you can find a nice rhythm, if you've ever seen the movie Soul, in Soul, the main character has this moment where he's playing piano and he loses himself. He kind of gets in the zone. That zone is a really magical place as an artist, because at a certain point, your A brain turns off, and it's the brain that, it's like the brain that says, oh, do this, don't do this, do this, don't do this. And sometimes if you can get that to turn off and your B brain takes over, and then your B brain's like, oh, well, this would be cool. Oh, well, this would be cool. Oh, what about this? Oh, this is really interesting. Oh, what about this? And you're not focused on technique. Sorry, I'm cutting the piece. You're not focused on technique. You're focused on the journey getting to the end, these ideas coming to life. And that's what we're really looking at here is how can we make sure to get as much richness out of this story that we're developing? Is it like a written story? Absolutely not. I'm a shitty writer. I have no interest in that. But I love communicating stories. I love communicating expressions of emotion. That's what you see in my last two pieces, really. If you're curious about my last piece, you can always find me on Instagram at Random Hamilton. And there you can always get shouts of when I'm going live, see my latest work, and also pretty soon I'll be previewing a lot of my slides and my YouTube kind of buffers I've been creating in After Effects. So I'd love to have your opinions, feedback, and ideas on those. One of those posted on Instagram as well. You'll notice I use this piece of paper underneath my hand. That's because I am a caveman and I can't possibly lift my hand while I draw. So instead of running the risk of smearing ink that I've recently laid down, I go ahead and just lay down this piece of paper and it protects everything. Very, very common amongst artists. The only difference you'll see with mine is that I've got a bunch of squigglies on it. And that's because I'm primarily working with a Bic pen, and Bic pens, unfortunately, just the very nature of the way they function, the ink can clog inside of the chamber right behind the ball for the ballpoint. And what you have to do sometimes is just go and give it a spin on the paper here. All right. So the booze bottle is holding on exactly as much importance as we want, and that is just kind of making sure that you can very clearly read it. But we're going to go ahead and tone that back as we do more smoke. So you'll see that start to push back a little bit, and that really big chunk of black won't be as prominent. Welcome to those who are with me. Thank you for being here today. We are just kind of crunching along in this latest piece. The title of this piece is The Man with Only One Remaining Given Name. A little bit of a self-portraiture, if you will. My experience streaming so far, ideas blowing up, and just kind of seeing this thing turn into something amazing. So yeah, that's what we're currently pushing on. And we'll be doing this for, let's say, another hour and a half. Sounds about right? Again, any ideas, comments, suggestions, things you'd like to see drawn on the channel, please send them my way. As much as I love being here drawing my own stuff, the goal of this channel is for us to start creating assets and ideas from the channel, from you. And let's, and developing from there and starting to build up towards an art book and eventually a vinyl toy line. So this is all kind of a work in progress, and just to see what we can build as time goes on. Now, I've really committed to this top of the head. I don't usually do this, I don't usually come up here and spend all of my time up in the top before I push down the page. It's just not really how I operate, but there's a reason for it this time. There's so much texture and so much black at the top of the page that I'm concerned that if I go down here and I start laying in my pen work down here and I get too dark, I'm going to feel really worried, and then all of a sudden have to start lightening this really quickly. And I'm worried that I might create an unintentional balance issue. So I'm going to come up here, I'm going to finish the top of the head. And then in the process of doing that, when I finally know exactly what this thing's going to look like up here, as I move down the page, I can then start making very clear decisions on just how much shading I want to put at the bottom. It's kind of the goal. There's a lot of stuff that's happening down here, like my hands are bound by rope. There's some banners, there's going to be some font. I've got little creatures kind of crawling out around my shirt, around my arms. So there's a lot that's going to happen in this space that you can't really resolve visually right now, but I've kind of like sketched it out in my head and kind of laid down the loose position of everything on here. So that will resolve very quickly. Also, you'll notice I've got lightning bolts in here, and like X's and O's and circles. I kind of like knickknacks. That's just something I enjoy in my art. Sometimes I'll just put words floating, sometimes I'll put little details. There's no real reason. They're neither here nor there. Think of them like lowercase letters that are just kind of floating out there. They don't hold any real importance, but what they do is they provide some really nice debris. And when you have really high detail pieces that are all anchored together, a little debris goes a long way. You'll notice I chew on my pens. Bad habit. Terrible for your teeth. As an artist, it's just my cross to bear. It's something I'll end up doing until I'm an old man when I have no teeth and I'm just like gumming on some pens. But for me, it's almost like a way to give myself something tangible, like a fidget spinner to play with while I'm drawing. It lets my mind kind of focus on the art and distract myself from getting too caught up in the moment. Just one of those things. So this is what I call art cards, and something you will see is by the end of a piece of art, My pen will usually look something more akin. Let's see if I can show you. There we go. You'll notice this beautiful craquelure at the back is pretty much me just chewing the hell out of the back of the pen. Okay, so back to this guy. So we got the liquor bottle. That's working really good. I'm not too worried about all the crap on the label. We'll deal with that. Something you'll notice, I leave a lot of pen work and pencil work here. That's actually something I've chosen to recently to embrace as part of like what I do. I used to spend a lot of time going and cleaning up my artwork, taking it to Photoshop, getting rid of all the excess stuff, really just keeping the black lines. And I always was disappointed with, when I got to the end, I felt like I lost some of the personality. So the resolution to that is I am now leaving it all in there. Fuck it. What's the point, right? Let's leave it. Let's show the story. Let's show how we got here, and that will kind of serve to kind of be a part of the tapestry we're creating. Now initially this skull had like wings, and I think I just decided I wanted to get rid of that, but I kind of like the skull. It's kind of a fun little, like, there's a skull inside that head, you know, even though it's super tiny. But what I think I might do is I might go ahead and do like a skull and crossbones, but instead of the skull and crossbones like sitting how it normally would, the crossbones are like blowing out because of the explosion. And I think that might be a nice little touch. Now I just got to make sure that I follow my explosion lines. So run a line here, run a line here, run a line here, run a line here, run a line here. Okay. And so now everything's exploding out in the correct trajectory. Because again, we're not going for realism, but we're also not going for completeness, like not accepting reality, right? We're finding our realism in realistic details, so to speak. And so now let's go ahead and put the bone in here. And then let's run some action lines off it. Like that. This one will be like twisting almost. So that you get the idea that they are crossed, even though they're kind of blasting out. Very Team Rocket of them. Never hurts to make some sound effects when you're doing this kind of stuff, because it gives you the right energy. I know it sounds super silly, but trust me, when you're drawing something with energy, with push, making a few sound effects goes a long way. I learned that from actually one of my favorite manga artists, Horikoshi, who is the manga artist of the mangaka of My Hero Academia. And one of my favorite things is listening to him talk about the way that he thinks about when he draws his characters, because he will spend hours delving into what a character is before he ever puts pen to paper, or pencil to paper in this case. And Horikoshi is amazing in action, drawing action lines, creating action orientation, movement. And he talked about how he'll make sound effects during the process, and I just grafted onto that, and the moment I started doing it, I never looked back. It just makes it fun, give yourself something like, it's cool, so have fun with it. So, I'm not going to go super committal with the bone. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and lay down some initial lines. Again, we are not going for a realistic skull and crossbones. I'm just looking to insinuate that what would have been a skull and crossbones is currently blasting off again, aka Team Rocket. So we have bone there, we have bone here. I'm going to give them a slight bend, just to kind of insinuate that there's like a force of pushing them out, and some of that speed, when you see something bend, kind of indicates that it's moving at speed. Now, obviously, I can't do that to the skull, but that's okay, because the skull is so inconsequential of the larger detail. Cool. Let's go ahead and start laying in some of those movement lines before we worry about any of the shading. Now you'll notice I've already got some lines here right below, and if I follow those, I'll be in great shape. You also notice I had laid down a few lines there that I ended up just going right over the top of. That happens. You know, sometimes you get excited, you start putting your pen down and realize, oh, I just went the wrong direction. That's fine. You know, nothing we do here is so precious that we can't fix it. I know we're working with ink, but we're working with a ballpoint pen. And there's a reason we work with a ballpoint pen, and that gives us a little bit of freedom to play. Nothing is so locked in that it can't be out-contrasted, out-shaped. I mean, you name it. We have room to really maneuver here. There we go. Alright, so we got our action lines. We know the angle of the explosion. I'm probably going to go ahead and put a little more smoke coming out here, just to kind of give the bones something to anchor to, because remember, this is going to be a vinyl sculpt. Eventually I'm going to be sculpting these in ZBrush on the channel, and we're going to be making vinyl toys or vinyl statues. So anything that's out here has to be physically connected to something else, so that when we sculpt it physically, the bone can be sticking out of like a circular chunk of smoke. So that is the goal. The goal here is to eventually get ourselves to the art book, and once we get to the art book, then we're going to start working on getting ourselves to the vinyl toy line. And then once we got the vinyl toy line, who knows, right? Where do we go from there? What do we accomplish? Sky's the limit. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to keep these clouds a lot lighter than the ones they're in front of, because I don't want these clouds to stand out. I almost want these clouds to seem like they've had a chance to disperse a little bit, gotten a little more oxygen, and they're starting to lose some of that sootiness, that immediate rush of material from the explosion. And since the explosion itself, at the very center, that idea was black, then that stands to reason that the soot, or the material that came along with the explosion, would also be black. But the farther we get out, the less required we are to really adhere to that level of darkness. And what you'll see is if we keep things light here, then all we're having to do once we lay down the initial lines, all we're really having to do is go through and just do a little bit of blending between that darker section and the lighter section. Now, keep in mind, something you'll notice from my line work, I am consistently pulling my lines in the same direction as all the lines down here. Everything is focusing towards this center point. So this center point really is kind of the heart of my universe. And as long as from this point, everywhere I go is aligning to the lines we've laid down, we'll have no problem making sure that when you see this, your first read is explosion. Something I'm really excited to do that I've never had the opportunity to blend. You can see how I might ink with my pens. I do these long lines, and it's a very stylized look that's very unique to me. I hope is a unique element to my art. We'll see. One of the things I'm really excited to do is when I start sculpting these pieces and making them in 3D, I can't wait to do the custom texture work and make the textures look hand-painted, hand-drawn. I think that's something that'll make them stand out, make them really interesting, instead of just being flat designed, printed plastic with then like a color wash on them. That to me isn't going to feel very authentic to what we're trying to do here. I'm going to try to adhere to that as much as I can. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start laying in some darkness on these bones. They are rounded objects after all, so there are contours on them. I'm not worrying too much about trying to get these to be like super realistic, but you know, insinuating the proper shapes is never a bad thing. Now, I may not go and hardline these items. I actually may want them to just blend into the smoke. They're not a very important piece. They're not like an eyeball or the mouth. So they may not require me to go in and actually like lay down any kind of focused details. And I'm just going to go ahead and just treat them as if they are following the smoke. Obviously, a few little details will pop out. But you'll see what I was talking about. You know how we drew the whole bone? Well, you'll notice if you look down at the bottom here, that bone is barely present, right? So think about when you're working in pen, think about that everything is only as like present as the darkest thing next to it. And what I mean by that is it really is a game of contrast. And if you can nail your control of your contrast, nothing on the page is too permanent. Does that make sense? Right? Like, we're not trying to make sure every pen stroke is perfect. I think that would be a horrible way to draw, and I think it would really feel frustrating if you made a mistake. What we're trying to do is we're trying to control the flow of the eye. I'm trying to make sure that when somebody looks at this, they follow the path that I've laid down. And that may seem like a little strange to you at first if you're not comfortable with designing a composition around the way the eye works, but that's a very, it's a very common thing for artists to have to think about, is what story are you trying to tell and how do you want somebody to take that information in. And I think it's very helpful if you think about your artwork in that way. Think about the journey that you want the eye to go on and let that be the guide. I'll show you what I mean here in a second when we move on from this section, when I don't have to be covering up essentially the primary focus of the artwork, which really is that explosion. And I'm going to let the action lines kind of go past the bone. This is a very common thing to do if you're trying to really insinuate a good amount of speed. You can allow the action lines to kind of carry just slightly past the object, and it kind of insinuates that, you're catching it in just this glimpse of motion. Now, I don't need to go too dark out here, but I do need to make sure to resolve this shape of this smoke. Because even though we're not going dark with the smoke, we still need to make sure that it's very clear what the formal boundaries of the smoke billow, the cloud, if you will. Billow is kind of like the puffiness. And as you can see, that line work is just mwah as far as conveying exactly where that bone's at. That thing is blasting out, shooting off in one direction with the skull, which we'll add here. And if it helps you to kind of think of it like animation, that's a very good way. I've had the opportunity to work with and learn alongside and learn with animators. I had to do animation myself for a little while, just in school. But then in my industries, I've worked with animators on several occasions. And I gotta say, animators really do, understand the cause and the effect. And what I mean by that is a good animator, when they look at something or they're going to animate something, they can already kind of start picturing the keyframes. They can already they're picturing like exactly how something's going to respond physically or with motion. At least a lot of the animators I've worked with. And that's such a great practice, because when you think about something as being animated, you're not thinking about trying to get the picture right, you're thinking about trying to get the movement right. And the movement is what we're trying to establish here. And this is a big point of explosion. This movement is everything. So we're really wanting to make sure we carry that momentum outward. So just don't get too static. You know, don't feel like, oh, this isn't a hard line, this needs to be this way. Like, this is your art. Your art can be any way you want it. There's just zero limitation. And if you feel caged, then, you know, understand that you're probably creating those boundaries for yourself. And it's just, it can be really daunting, and it can be really detrimental to you completing a piece. So, you know, do yourself a favor, get out of your own way if you can, and just accept the fact that, you know, the piece is going to go where it's going to go. You're along for the ride, you're the creator, of course, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you always have the amount of control that you would like to have. And sometimes that's just part of the gig, you know? Accepting what little control you have and just kind of rolling along with it. So again, we're not going for a realistic skull, obviously. This skull and bones is way too small to be the skull for this guy, right? What we're doing is we're insinuating. We're creating these kind of connective pieces that kind of tell the story of the exploding head. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go dark underneath the skull to pop that skull right out. Because I don't want the skull to be super dark. I don't want the skull to feel important, but I do want the skull to at least visually read. And so in order to do that, we just make sure that the area around the skull is a lot darker. And that will, by contrast, push that skull right out. Let's go ahead and give this a little bit of a hard line there, just to kind of give us some defining. You'll notice I'm not going to go in and I'm not going to hardline every element. I just want to hardline elements that I think that will pop out, or that I want to stand out slightly. And the skull's fun because it fits my aesthetic. It kind of tells, it's a story element, obviously. And it just kind of is a unique contributor to this piece, so much so that it at least shows a little bit of the mortality and the fact that this is, I guess, affectionately me. For those who are just joining us, welcome to the stream. My name is Random Hamilton, and we are continuing to push on this piece of art we've been working on this week. This is titled The Man with Only One Remaining Given Name, as a self-portrait, so to speak. Yeah. So we are working primarily in pen, with a little bit of pencil to kind of guide us. And then we'll see where this one takes us. For those who weren't on the morning stream when I was talking about this, my wife has asked me to do a positive, fun, and upbeat picture for the next one, and it has to incorporate flowers. It's been a minute since I've done anything like that. I don't tend to think my art is dark, but I do think my art tends to lean into more of a darker subject matter. Go figure. Alright, now let's go ahead and just start playing in some of this detail for the skull, just to ground it, really. And so, I don't need to go heavy detail, but I do need to make sure I define where the highest points of shadow are. So that's going to be the ocular bone right above the hole where the eye actually settles in. That's going to be a little bit of a structural buildup right here, down to where the bone for the nose is. Just a little bit of an extra shadow on the left side. This is kind of this is that shelf right above the cheekbone. Now again, we're not going for realism here. The skull does not make sense in context to the scale of the head, and even the anatomy of it's way off. But that's okay, because what we're trying to do is we're trying to insinuate that A, there's a skull. Let's give it a crack, kind of justify that little shelf of a line that I have there. let's go ahead and just give the back of this head just a little bit more darkness, a little bit more roundness. There we go. Got some cracks in the head already. You know, one of the things I think that I misunderstood, or I thought when I was younger as an artist, is I thought that everything had to be perfect. I really held that over myself. I had the biggest case of imposter syndrome for years and years and years. I wouldn't even call myself an artist. My wife would get so mad at me. So I'm like, I'm not really an artist. I draw. I couldn't accept it. But the thing is when you're creating art, you're not creating art to go into a panel of other artists to judge your work. I mean, I know that happens in art class, but in real life, that's not the way it works. There will always be critiques out there, and you should genuinely try to embrace the feedback and get better. That's the point, right? But understand that when you're creating art to satisfy first your own sensibilities, your own visual needs and ideals, or if you're working for a client or doing a custom piece of work for somebody, then your viewer is a very specific individual who has asked you or tasked you with accomplishing something. But for the most part, when you're creating art, you have so much room to just be true to what you want to do and what you want to output. And if you get too caught up on trying to force a level of quality that you're just not hitting, or a level of style that you're just not hitting, it can become such a bear and so daunting and make you feel like you're just not good enough. And that's one thing I think that I would really love to change about the art community. I went to art college, and I learned some of the worst examples and the worst mindsets at college than I have in the rest of my career. That's not to say that the education that I got was bad, but the education that I got wasn't made to show an artist to be successful. The education I got was how to take an artist and fit them into a category of career so that they could make money. That was the whole point, right? So, for me, I spent years trying to overcome these ideals and these bad habits and this belief that, well, if I didn't do this, I couldn't get a job here. If I didn't draw like this, or I didn't concept art like this, I couldn't get a job on this video game and this here. And at a certain point, you just realize that nobody cares. If it looks good, if it fits what's being asked for, or if it brings a fresh idea to the table that is just so special that it's undeniable, then you've done what you needed to do, right? There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. If you've nailed what you're trying to nail, then you've done it. And so, getting out of your own way and kind of accepting where things land on a picture is a skill, and it's a learned skill. You have to find the place where you feel really comfortable to say, you know what, that's good enough. And it's something that I still struggle with. I will struggle with probably the end of my days, and my wife made this comment last night because I was looking at a piece I did last week, and I loved it. I was really happy with what we were able to accomplish on the stream last week. So for anybody who was here for that, thank you so much. It is astounding how far you guys help push those ideas. And so now I'm like, okay, I was really happy with it. Well, I went back and looked at it, and I was like, wow, this is wrong, and this is wrong, and this is wrong. And, that's okay. It's okay that I feel that way. But I'm glad that I felt that way in retrospect versus in the moment. Because if I felt that way in the moment, I don't think we would have gotten to the end. And that's a real problem. And a lot of artists run into that. They allow the negative place they're in to stop their progress. It's very easy to happen. So easy to happen. And I think the real trick is to be able to step back and just be like, it's okay where it's at, and move forward. And at a certain point, those things that aren't that important kind of become so minuscule that you just stop thinking about them. Now, you'll see them later on and be like, fuck, I totally missed that spot. But if you can get to that point where you get out of your own way and you just create, and what comes, the level and quality of work that you'll output can genuinely surprise you. You have to give yourself the room and the leeway to go there, and that's very tough. So, the big goals, if I was to say, like, for me, the primary exercises I do to get to that point is I think about the piece contextually. What's this piece for? Now, if this piece was something that was going to, like, oh, this is a big portfolio piece, or this is a tattoo that's going on somebody's arm, or this is for a client and I know they're really specific, well then, yeah, maybe it's a little bit tougher. But I think that's almost where you need to practice the most, because that client has never seen this piece of art before you put it in front of them. And maybe they'll like it, maybe they won't. Maybe they'll see an area where you're like, oh crap, I fucked up, I hope they don't see that. Okay, maybe they'll see that. And then they'll say, hey, can you fix that, right? But if you are stopping yourself and preempting yourself before you ever get to that point, now we're not talking about putting out bad quality work. We want good quality work. But what we're talking about is giving yourself the room to put something down and move forward and letting your ideas percolate, letting your ideas evolve. Because that's what this is kind of all about. You have to give yourself the room to work through a problem before you start telling yourself that it's not good enough. A lot of people stop themselves really short. They'll start getting into a space where they're like, oh yeah, well, I want to do this, I'm not doing this, I'm not doing this, and before you know it, they said, well, I'm not hitting it, so I've stopped. That's super common. Anybody who's done anything, any project, not just art, building something, cooking something, writing something, drawing something, playing an instrument, walking down the street, if you don't allow yourself to take the journey, how can you see where you're going to trip? You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's a stupid analogy. Okay, I just made that shit up. It's not a good one. But you get the idea, right? You've got to give yourself the room to make mistakes to then be able to see if those mistakes are really that bad. Alright, so we've pretty much solided up this side of the piece. I mean, at this point, I can go ahead and call this side pretty wrapped. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to take this black marker, or this Micron, and I'm just going to give this guy a solid pop. Because I don't really need to show that graded edge. And that's just going to really frame in that smoke to get a little bit of roundness. Assassinate undo concept like you're shading and feathering. Yeah! Thank you. Assassination by yeah, it's pretty funny. It's a great Asai 2005. It is exactly a representation of my ideas coming to life on this screen. Last week's piece was a little more about kind of coping with life, coping with bills, coping with student loans and all that, and then trying to get my ideas out. So, this week is moving that idea forward and jumping into something a little more realistic of what I'm facing every single day, which is running this stream and working through all the ideas as they come. And being on mic and doing art in this space has just taken the ideas that I've been having to such a crazy place that I've never had before. Guys, for context, I was telling my wife this last night, it sounds super corny, I've never drawn this confidently and this, I don't want to say good, I don't like weird, I've never drawn this good, that sucks. Yeah. Well, there you go. This is, it's cathartic. But yeah, there's something about being able to just enjoy the process, and that's kind of where I'm at. Next week's is going to be interesting because my wife has asked me that it's positive and that it's got flowers in it. So it's going to be a very big departure and turn away from the tonality of the last two. Alright, so we've got all the smoke blowing out there. We've hard-lined this piece in. Let's go ahead and just make sure that this black line nestles nicely in with the shadow there, with the smoke there. Just really giving it that little bit of extra crisp roundness. This is something you'll often see in Macbeth's work, where he'll use different blacks, but he'll kind of make sure to kind of blend them in softly. It's something that I just love. And James Jean does the same thing, and I absolutely love the way they both approach art. If you've never looked up either of these artists, I definitely suggest you do. They're wonderful. Okay. So I'm not going to worry about hardlining the beard. Let's leave that pretty loose. I'm going to go through and just give this guy a little bit of an eraser pass, just to see if we can pull out some of this floating green that's really unessential. Now I know I was talking about how I want to start leaving behind the pencil work, and that's true. I'm gonna really not, I could take like a mechanical eraser and come in here and really pull that pencil out, but that's not where I'm at. But I do think that if you have areas where you can just lift excess pencil that's not doing anything, it's probably not a bad idea. Let's go ahead and take this guy. Give that a little bit of a more crisp line. Let's really make sure that we clarify what this shape is, because I kind of let the shape fall off lightly, and I just need to make sure that we're very clear on what the boundaries of that is, because I'm going to have to sculpt this later, and so I have to think about this piece as something that is also a map for a 3D model. And hopefully, eventually, a 3D print. A bust, a vinyl toy, you name it, we'll make it. Gotta figure out what that's going to be. For those who are just joining me, welcome to the channel. Welcome to my stream. My name is Raymond Hamilton. New streamer, started last week, and we create art. This first couple weeks is just me pretty straightforward, it's me making pieces, but as we get more people on the channel, we get more participation, your ideas, your suggestions, and your goal, what you'd like to see draw, will become much more common. I would like the majority of the artwork done on this channel to be from your ideas, not mine. So as we go forward, message me, share ideas with me, ask me in the chat here, or hit me on social media, and I would love to hear what your thoughts are. If you have any requests, specific characters, specific style, I operate in a range of different styles. If you're curious, you can find me on ArtStation to kind of see the range of which I work in. And so this is just kind of where I'm at right now, but this is by no means the limitation of where we'll go with the channel. You're going to see some sculpting, you're going to see some digital painting, you're going to see some Photoshop, you're going to see some pencil and pen work, we're going to do some character design, we're going to maybe redraw some Disney princesses, who knows. We'll see where it goes. Let the art take us where it's going to take us. So you'll notice I turn the page a lot for those who haven't been on the stream with me before. The reason for that is it's kind of a twofold thing. Part of it is to clarify composition, just to make sure that the composition is maintained from all angles. This is a very common practice in digital, where a digital artist will take their piece and they'll do a horizontal flip, and what that means is to reverse the picture. And so they'll see the picture like this, and they'll flip it so then they can see from the other direction to see if anything feature-wise or is off place. I kind of do the same thing, but just by rotating the page, just to make sure that I'm catching all the angles. It's very easy to miss something if you just look from one angle all the time, or at least for me it is. Okay, so now, let's see. I can stop up here. We'll resolve this when we get this area worked out. I've got that ear going off there. I don't think I need to do another ear. I should probably do this eye up here, actually. That would not be a bad idea. Now, something you will notice, and if you haven't caught it already, that's totally okay. I don't expect you to, but you'll notice that the eyes and the mouth are still very much in the same scale and symmetry of what a lot of my little kind of characters are, and that's entirely by intent. Because I need it to see that when you look up there, you see the face, even if the face is blown apart. By seeing those features and seeing that face, that is what allows this piece to kind of work. If there was just a lack of features, then it wouldn't make sense, it wouldn't quite read. But by creating these moments where there's consistency, style-wise, in what you're seeing to what you expect to see from my art style. That's the kind of stuff that lets you start telling the story on my behalf. Because you're going to eventually see this, or somebody's going to see this, and they're going to be like, what in the hell? And you'll be there, and you'll be like, oh no, that's what this is all about. And they'll be like, oh, that's weird. And you'll be like, yeah, it's totally weird. Because it is. My art's totally weird. I accept that. I embrace it, if you will. Guys, we have made some crazy progress in a day and a half, let me just say. This has been a kind of a run through. I'm kind of impressed with how far we've pushed on this guy. I'm going to go ahead and make the structure for the other eye. Now again, think about this. We're seeing the explosion as everything blows this way. So I'm definitely going to see the inside line of this guy, and we're treating the face pieces kind of like porcelain. So you're definitely going to see inside edges. If you're familiar, or you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, see if you have an old plate or something in the house that's you can break. Go break it so that it kind of breaks into its separate pieces, and then just take a slice and hold it up, you know, like turn it around in your hand, and you'll see that there is definitely that thickness to it, and that thickness needs to convey, because that thickness is what allows this to say, oh, this is like all the other broken pieces. That works. Alright, now we're going to start building in and developing the layers of shadow on this guy. And again, we're working with the ballpoint pen, so we're going to keep it super soft. This is supposed to be the skin area. You'll look at the level of shading I have on this one. It's just not that intense. We need it to be a little bit brighter. So we're going to go ahead and take it, and we're just going to start really soft. I'm going to start on the inside of the eye. Now, even though this isn't a realistic eye, we still have to think about the contours around the eye. You know, nobody's going to look at this and think, hey, that doesn't look like a real eye. Well, yeah, duh. But what they will say is, I don't see how that's actually an eye, right? And one of the challenges we have is just going and making sure that we have contoured the appropriate structure around the eye. It's a subtle thing. I went too hard here. That's fine. It's not that big of a deal. I'm going to add a little bit of a overshadow here. Just trying to insinuate that there is some organicness and a gradual shading, because that is indicative of skin. Skin naturally has very, very, very few sharp lines on the body. I mean, the sharpest lines in the body reside in the saddle of the body, right? Area where we have the tightest connective points or angles or wrinkles tend to reside lower in the chassis. You do have sharp lines in your face, obviously, but even those features are fairly diffuse. Alright. Cool. Put a little bit extra here. Insinuate the eye. Alright. Alright, now that'll work. If you are just joining on the stream, welcome to the stream. My name is Random Hamilton, and I am working on some pen and ink work today. We all are. Welcome to the channel. If you have any questions, concerns, suggestions, ideas, please hit me here in the chat or on my social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, or ArtStation, where my portfolio is. I'm glad to have you here. Throw in any ideas, please don't be shy. I love to take questions and also take suggestions, ideas, and also requests for next projects. Okay. So what you see here is now I've got this area to resolve around the mouth. Now the mouth is nice and popped out. I don't need to do much. I don't need to shade down to the mouth or anything like that. But I am going to go ahead and start laying in the action line so I continue with what I started below. Because again, everything on this piece, the entire anchor, the way it works, hinges on this being the center focal point, and everything from this point exploding outward. So it all has to explode outward in the correct line weight, and anywhere that I come in here, I gotta make sure I respect that line direction, and just make sure I don't deviate from that, because if I do, then your eye is gonna stop on that spot. It's really unfortunate, but it's just the way the eye works. Your eye, nature has given you the biggest bullshitometer, and it's automatic. You may not understand why it's wrong, and that's fair. You may not be able to look at it and say, oh, well, clearly this, and this. But the way our eyes work, we are trained to look for things that are out of the norm and then decide if those things are dangerous. So even without you thinking about it, you're automatically sizing up a image or something to see if it's dangerous and see if you need to be cautious around it. It's just kind of the way our eyes work. We're a very complex machine, so to speak. Now I've just got a bunch of like little debris. This is something I really like to seed into pieces like this. Just there's no reason not to. This is the kind of stuff that makes it feel a little more chaotic, a little more oomph. It's just a little extra effort that goes a long way. Does that detail matter? Absolutely not. It doesn't matter in any way, shape, or form. But it has when somebody sees that, they go, oh, okay. And keep in mind, these little debris pieces are jettisoning away from that centerpiece. So anytime I add debris, go through and just give it a few little lines, and what you'll notice is these lines are going to line right up the lines below it and create some natural darkness, and all of a sudden, you've got a bunch of these errant pieces blowing away as well. It's a super subtle thing, but man, it really does add. Now we have the bottle that blasted away. I'm going to go ahead and have to add a few of these lines to the bottle, but I don't really want to make it about that. I don't want to break the form too much, so I'm just going to go ahead and just layer a few of these on there. Maybe come from this angle. Yeah, that'll be better. And here's the trick. If you have the action lines go right up against the bottle, you don't actually need to put action lines on the bottle, right? You've told the story. The bottle got up there through the explosion. So it's not that important to have the bottle like also action liney to all hell. It's just not necessary. Something I'd love to do too on the channel, I'd love to host drawing classes. Does that sound something that would be interesting to you guys? Is that something you'd want to do? Nothing crazy, maybe we can do a lesson on drawing practice, how to warm your hand up, some exercises. We could do things like drawing the head, drawing the hands. Just stuff that's the fundamentals that really is good practice that I can always use more effort in. So when I do it, I'll probably suck as well, and that's okay. It would be fun to make this a space where when people come here, before they think about seeing good art, they come here to think about seeing ways to grow. That's kind of my ultimate goal. Alright, so we've allowed this smoke to stay in front of the bottle for a reason. I want this smoke up here to start be the area that's going to lighten up at the top. If you're just joining the stream, welcome on, and thank you for being here. My name is Random Hamilton. I am a digital artist, stay-at-home dad, dude that likes to draw. And I'm just kind of here hanging out with you guys, making some art. I guess when I'm working in traditional, I shouldn't say digital artist. I guess that's kind of contradictory. I am just a guy that enjoys being creative. How about that? And I really enjoy being a stay-at-home dad, and so that combination of things has led me to Twitch and YouTube and Facebook and whatever else will allow me to sustain this lifestyle that is being home with my son while he grows up. It's pretty cool. Okay. Alright, so I'm going to do something in the skull that I don't usually do, but I'm really not enjoying how much obstruction it has. At some point I'm going to take a grayscale marker to that skull and just ground it in a different gray. That way it stands out without standing out. That happens sometimes too. Okay, these lines are going this way. So again, let's adhere to the direction of the action. And luckily we have the skull right here, so the skull is the perfect way to make sure that our lines are following. Okay. Let's just go ahead and take these straight up. Awesome. I feel like it'd be nice if there was some kind of ping or something if somebody typed, just so I knew when to look up. I always feel bad kind of looking down and then worrying that I'm going to miss something somebody says. Which I guess isn't that big of a deal because I just tend to scroll back up, but... Alright, let's go ahead and add in our little X's. Yes. You know, I don't think I want to have this be like this almost looks like too much like an afro if I carry that line over. So I think what up here I might go ahead and do is pull out some of this pencil and then let this guy maybe just close out right here. And that way it's like contained. The shape looks like it's coming out and then it kind of goes back down into it. That lets me then really enhance the contour in this guy, to the bottom. You know, this is something you'll notice me do is I'll take a piece, I'll put it down, I'll sit back and I'll look at it. Be willing to have these conversations with yourself as you go. I think, or at least I feel that it may be in your best interest to always reassess your piece as you go. It's not to say that it's better or worse, but it's about making sure that as you go through the piece, you're making these decisions in a conscious way and not responding to mistakes or feeling like, oh, I drew it in pencil this way, I've got to do it in pen this way because that's what I drew. No, fuck that. Excuse the language if you're offended by that, but no. It's not about hitting exacts, it's about communicating your story. And so in this case, I want my story to exist over here. This is so unimportant that if I give it too much importance, if I give it too much body, then somebody feels like they need to look up there, and it's just not necessary, which is why I kind of want to ground the skull. Because it's a skull right now, because it's there, but it's not quite there, now it's more interesting than it really needs to be, which is a problem. So let's go ahead and take this guy. Alright guys, we got about 5 more minutes and then I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. Because I need to help my wife with something, and that is what you do when you are a home husband. You make sure to take care of all the shit that needs to get done. Because happy wife, happy life. That's how it works. We got about 5 more minutes. Let's go ahead and resolve this section, and I think that'll be a really good place for us to stop for the day and call it good. Now I've already got all this explosion here, and also I don't need this back cloud to be as prominent. I don't need it to be a heavy detail piece, so I'm just going to go ahead and just keep it super light. Again, all these lines match up to the lines that are leading up to it. It's very important that you maintain that consistency, because if you don't, your viewer's eye is going to stop there, and that's going to suck, because then they're not going to follow the story you're trying to tell. They're going to follow the story that their eye is telling them to stop at. It's a subtle thing, but it's a thing. So we're going to go ahead and we're just going to extend that. Bring in some of that shading. this can go a little bit darker because it's behind the cloud. Just going to kind of build this one up a little bit, let this be more prominent. You know, in this case I'm doing something a little bit different. I'm allowing the front to be darker than, you know, and more prominent in certain areas in the back, because I want the back to kind of almost wash out. And so by doing this thing where we darken these areas, we actually provide more context and more highlighting to the shapes around it, which in turn is the skull and then the eye here. And this is kind of the process. It's this back and forth. It's this sharing of attention and value as you go around the piece. And I'll always come back around and reshade an area to then create more of a visual read on something that's more important. You know, the smoke and the speed lines, those are essentially my glue that are gluing all the areas of this piece together. Oh, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. Is it Asai 2005 or Asia 2005? Because I'm reading it as Asia. Is it Asia? Are you related to me? Because I have a cousin who has such names. And I don't want to assume because you're on Twitch, but I think I know who you are. Thank you. It's really nice sharing art. I realized recently that I'm less attached to the final work, and I'm more attached to the process and having A say A. Yes. Yeah. All right. Nice to see you, cuz. Welcome. Well, I'm glad you're here. Oh, it'd be nice actually to have a formal conversation with you sometime. Let's go ahead and see. Let's keep pushing. And again, all we're using is we're using these shapes and these shadows to create. Actually, I guess you wouldn't be my niece. No, you wouldn't be that. I don't know. Either way, I'm glad you're here. For context, I have a lot of extended family I haven't seen for a long time, mostly due to my irresponsibility and just where I've gone in life, and I haven't connected with them. And this has opened some new doors to reconnect to them. So that's why there's a little confusion there. The name is so similar, but yeah. This is my uncle. Hey, Aaron, dude, glad to have you here, man. You know, since you're here, I can just talk out loud, and I don't think the other person on the channel will really care. We would love to find a reason to come on to Coos Bay once I've got a little more money coming in. And, hey, fantastic, guys. Well, there you go. I appreciate you guys being here. Well, then it's just a family stream at this point. Sometime we should connect. I would love to find a reason for us to come out. I'd love you guys to be able to meet Otto and my wife Kelly. Life has definitely transitioned quite a bit since last time I was in Coos Bay, so it'd be great to be back there and show them. I've talked about Coos Bay for years to them. I'd love for them to be able to actually go out to the docks in Charleston and go out to the Rose Gardens and just see Coos Bay, the beauty of it. I assume it hasn't changed too much. Awesome. Well, how about I shoot you my number on Facebook, and let's just hop on the phone sometime and just chat it out, because I think that'd be really great for us to get out there. I don't know how Grandma's doing these days, but I know it's been so long. It would be really nice to kind of see everybody. Everybody's moving forward in life, and I'd love to meet your guys' family. Yeah, I know. I'm still kind of working through some of that stuff when we were kids. But for the most part, I think that none of that. I don't hold that against anybody. It's just life. It's where we go and things that happen. I'd love to see Grandma. I'd love to see everybody. I've always been a little bit put off by the whole witness thing. I'm a heretic, so I'm always worried that I might not be accepted if I come out there, and I'd hate to have to put Kelly and Otto through that experience, that feeling. So I hope that that wouldn't be too much of a problem. But let's talk off here, and I'll I've worked out some kinks and. Oh yeah, I know that Shantae and Aaliyah have both made it out there a few times, and I always talk to them about it whenever I have a chance to connect to them. I've always been a little bit detached from all family, just as the nature of how I operate. I'm sure as time's gone on, you've heard, I just tend to kind of go off and do my own thing, but I'm really making an effort as I'm getting older to make real connective tissue with everybody. We only got one family, and I got my dad. When Dad's gone, so we changed our name just for our own reasons, and nothing to do with the Hardmans at all. But I do think that would be really nice to kind of make that reconnection again, for sure. All right. I feel like for right now, this area can be called done. And we can kind of revisit and develop this area on the next stream. Yeah, that's kind of how I've always operated too. Watch from a distance, kind of hang from a distance. Hey, listen, guys, thank you so much for being here today, especially family members. Thank you for being here. Extra support, I really appreciate that. It means the world to me. Aaron, I'll reach out. Let's connect. Let's keep this conversation going. If you're just joining the stream, thank you for popping in. I'm sorry we're taking off now. I have some home duties to assist before my son wakes up from his nap, and my wife is here and she needs some chores done. I hope you guys have an amazing evening. Thank you so much for being here. And please come by another time. I stream Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, and kind of just work on developing these pieces online. You can see the finished pieces on my Instagram. Or on my ArtStation. You can find me on Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, ArtStation, and Twitter. So, again, thank you guys very much for being here. We're going to wrap it up for the day. I hope you guys all have an amazing evening, and I will talk to you guys later. Also, uncle and cousin, it's great to see you guys, or talk to you guys. Thanks for being here. I really appreciate the support. All right, y'all. Much love, and y'all have an amazing evening.